What's going on with y'all, babies? Children and babies, welcome to Burn It Down with Kim Brown, the Friday edition. I'm so excited to see all y'all smiling face up in the place. Thank y'all so much for being here. Of course, you know, Burn It Down, Kim Brown, the spot, the safe space where we set oppression ablaze, everybody. And we have got a great show in store for you today. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here. I'd like to thank everybody that's watching us on YouTube. What's up to the Burn It Down Brigade? Even though I don't think we have officially decided on the Burn It Down Brigade, but I've seen it in the chat, and damn it, I like it. So we might be the Burn It Down Brigade. So shout out to everyone that's in the YouTube chat. Welcome to everyone that's watching us on Periscope via Twitter. Don't forget, you need to go over to our Twitter page, Burn It Down KB, at Burn It Down KB. Like, follow the page. Well, I guess you follow on Twitter, but follow the page because Periscope is going away at the end of this month. So we don't want to lose the good people that have been watching us very faithfully on Twitter. Please go over to YouTube, subscribe, and like the channel, Burn It Down with Kim Brown. And shout out to all of our patrons who have been holding us down, patreon.com/BIDWKB. So on today's show, everybody, now I know you see the show title, Conservative Klan coronate their king. As you know, last week or over the weekend was the CPAC convention, right? CPAC, always a motley crew of the who's who of the worst of the worst. However, Trump made his first appearance there at CPAC. First time we really seen Donald Trump since he left the White House. And, you know, Trump didn't say nothing. No, he didn't say nothing groundbreaking. But just know that the Republican Party is 100% united behind Donald Trump. And that was very evident at CPAC. Now, the reason we're going to talk about CPAC later today in the program is because I have a connection to CPAC. The only time I've actually ever made national news was because of my attendance at CPAC 2013. And later on the show, we're going to take a look at that experience. But I was present in that CPAC room with some prominent white nationalists, one by the name of Matthew Heinbach. Come to find out, who else has a odd connection to Matthew Heinbach? Our own Molly Shaw. It's hard to believe Molly did anything before she was social media runner for Burn It Down with Kim Brown. But Molly was one of the plaintiffs suing Donald Trump early in his presidential campaign back in 2016. So Molly's going to join us to talk about that infamous rally. You guys may or may not remember it. Lexington, Kentucky. Oh, was it Lexington or Louisville? Let's just go say Kentucky. It was in Kentucky where that Black woman was being pushed all around the floor by a bunch of Trump supporters. And Molly Shaw was there. So we're going to talk to Molly Shaw about that later on in the show. We're also going to talk about the House passing the Police Reform Act named after George Floyd. I have questions, concerns, and critiques, so stick around with that. But first, we're going to lead off the show talking about what is still happening down south. Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Georgia, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. These states are still very much dealing with that devastating major winter storm that blew through a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at the weather map and you're like, oh, it's 70 degrees in Texas, everything must be fine. It is totally not fine. Most Texans, people in their homes and in their apartments, suffered more damage to their plumbing, to their pipes, to their electricity during this winter storm than they did during Hurricane Harvey. And I want us to take a look at this package back from 2 weeks ago because, you know, sometimes when things fall out of the news cycle, people tend to forget something that was very horrific and very traumatizing for a large number of folks just a short time ago. So we're going to check out this package from WFAA TV from 2 weeks ago, just to give you guys an indication of what people were experiencing. But the plot twist is, whereas most people were dealing with a lot of inconvenience and in some cases horrible conditions, including death, what about the disabled community? What sort of precautions or perhaps special assistance in some way was given to people who are disabled, people who are elderly, people who are not mobile, people who are not verbal? How did this community fare during this weather climate crisis that happened down south. And if able-bodied people fared terribly, you can imagine that the disabled community fared much worse. And that is specifically what we're going to talk about. But Dwayne is here, everybody. Took the day off. So everybody, welcome Dwayne. Welcome back, Dwayne. Dwayne, if you could please run that package for me, sir.
I am freezing. I'm wearing sweats.
In a second-story senior living apartment,
A long sleeve shirt.
sits a bundled,
A fur-lined vest, gloves, boots.
bitterly cold Roseanne Cerati.
I'm 74 years old with several disabilities.
No internet for an interview via video chat. She didn't even want to open a door, trying to hold on to what precious little heat she had left.
I'm shaking. I'm so cold.
It's really, really cold, and we have 5 kids in the house.
Millions of Texans have no power, no heat, no hot water on one of the coldest days in Texas history.
The system is working. What you have is an extraordinary event.
The state's power grid, which reliably withstands record summers, could not withstand a record winter. Multiple plants that generate the power that travels these lines to our homes failed. Supply plummeted, demand skyrocketed, and ERCOT, which runs that grid, told providers, the people who bill you for power, to cut off customers.
We're trying to get warm.
That was Tamika. Here's Brianna, mother of 4.
You can put socks and extra pajamas on them and extra blankets, but when you're cold, you can't really think straight.
Forced outages happened across the state. Customers say they weren't prepared. ERCOT says it was.
We knew that with this weather event approaching that grid conditions were likely going to be tight.
Besides being frozen,
Finally got through. We were disconnected.
people are frustrated. Customer service isn't answering.
Sorry, we're busy. We can't take your call.
And Texas isn't thawing.
Now, if you are lucky enough to have power, it likely means that you live near a place that is critical to keep online. That's how they are targeting these forced outages.
And that was from WFAA television in Texas. And guys, I was reading this story from the Dallas Morning News from a few days back. And the headline is, will Texas ever figure out how many people died in this winter storm? So many people perished from hypothermia, from freezing to death, from carbon monoxide poisoning, from trying to either run grills in their house or warming up the car in the garage. I mean, it was a devastating, catastrophic event. And I'm very glad to welcome our first guest here on the program today to join us. We are going to be speaking, or about to speak with, or we'll be shortly speaking with, Mary Jane Williams. Mary Jane is the executive director of an organization called Family to Family, and they focus on the success of disabled children and their families and empowering their families. And Mary Jane, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on Burn It Down with Kim Brown. We appreciate you making some time.
I really appreciate it. This is great to talk about this issue.
Well, Mary Jane, you asked before we went live, how did I find out about Family to Family? And your organization was tagged in a mutual aid thread for people in Texas who were seeking help during the winter storm. And what jumped out to me about Family to Family is that your group specifically targets or reaches out to families with disabled children or disabled people in their family. And like that to me was so crucial because there's never a plan for disabled people, Mary Jane. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but like, the contingency and the lack of planning for disabled people and for their families is always glaring when it comes to any sort of catastrophic event, climate or otherwise. This was not different, I imagine, for disabled Texans and their families during this terrible, catastrophic climate event that happened a couple of weeks back. Tell us about either what you experienced or what some of your clients had to deal with when the water and power and heat went out.
I think the hard part for people initially, because most people with disabilities try to register with their power company and make sure that the power doesn't go out at their house. that system failed terribly. So many people were cut off, even when, you know, they have life-saving equipment, dialysis, you know, heart machines, oxygen, that sort of thing. And there were a lot of families out there that had to choose, do we stay here, and how long do you think the oxygen machine is going to work with our small generator, or do we need to take our kid to the hospital emergency room? It was not pretty, and families were panicked because they were worried about their children dying. You know, I think about my own son who has a disability, and he doesn't live by himself, but there was a story in our newspaper about a man, an adult with a disability, who was so proud to live in his apartment, and his apartment lost power, and then his cell phone died, and his family couldn't get to him because of the road conditions, and then he ultimately died of hypothermia. And you know, those are the ones we know about. So it's very frustrating. And I think now people think, oh, the weather's great now, everything's back to normal, and it's not. I mean, we had a request 2 days ago from a family who's seeking water for themselves. Once the power came back on and things started to heat up, a lot of people's pipes broke. For you guys that don't know this, in Texas, we don't have basements. Everything is up in the attic. The water heaters are up there most likely, and that's where the water comes from. And then once that happens, the pipes break and your ceiling crashes down and you've got a big mess. So yeah, that's a lot of families right now are still struggling with water. If you can't fix your pipes, the water can't come back on. So anyway.
And you know what, Mary Jane, I think, you know, people who don't live in the region, in the South, in Texas, might be surprised to still know this, to know that 2 and now 3 weeks later after this storm or this weather event, that people are still lacking access to water in their homes. And I've heard some even make the comparison that what happened in Texas with this climate, this unprecedented winter storm, was worse in some ways than when Hurricane Harvey came through. And you are in the Houston area. Is that a fair comparison in your opinion?
I think with Hurricane Harvey, there was a little bit more preparation. People were warned ahead of time. When you have a hurricane coming, a lot of times they do make a concerted effort to at least tell people, especially those with disabilities, you know, you might need to leave. For this one, I don't think anyone prepared anyone to say, hey, you're going to be without power for 4 days. How do you prepare for, I mean, during a hurricane, you sort of prepare for it, and usually it's warmer. So that's a little bit different. I mean, even during Hurricane Harvey, it was hard to get assistance to people with disabilities. If there was no accessible transportation, they couldn't make it to a shelter. So when your bus system stops running during this crisis, also, people couldn't get to warming stations. We collaborated a lot with the mayor's office for people with disabilities, and they, you know, we worked with some other agencies, crowdsourced rescue, and they really helped a lot delivering stuff. And I know they're still making deliveries to families now out there. We're able to push our families. They were geared primarily to helping elderly just get heat in their homes. They were delivering heaters at the beginning, or, you know, stuff to help elderly members in our community gain heat. And they branched out to water and food. And I know they're still doing deliveries now for a lot of people.
You know, Mary Jane, when we sort of deal with these incidents in piecemeal, right? So we know that we are going to have catastrophic weather events that are without a doubt going to knock out the power, possibly going to knock out the water, and that people are going to be requiring resources in some way. What ways can local governments, state governments, and even the federal government work to, I mean, I know we have a whole agency called FEMA, right? But it seems as though getting these resources to the places that are in most desperate need of them can take weeks. It's not an efficient system. Even sometimes when the help does arrive, it's not enough or it's come too late. In what ways, in your opinion, if we lived in the best place that actually thought things out in the future, how can disabled communities not be left out of critical emergency responses, especially weather-related events, when we know that they are definitely going to come?
Well, I think even in the state of Texas, we have this state registry for people with disabilities. And even if that registry was working correctly and that registry could be accessed by local communities, they could then turn around within 24 hours and start checking on people to make sure they were okay. I know Maria Town, who you got that tweet from and saw on Twitter, she's the one that referred us. She was here during Harvey, and I just know she just got so frustrated when she couldn't access that data for Houston so we could start checking on people here in Houston. They've got systems out there, but they make it too hard for systems to interact correctly. And I think if they all would play together, that would help for lots of systems. It's just a little frustrating.
I can imagine. I mean, frustrating and literally even deadly for some people. But people absolutely did not survive this storm. Did you hear from any of your clients who talked about either not being able to access shelters or warming stations because of their disability or because of the disabilities of their families or people that they were with? Was anyone denied help because of their disability that you're aware of?
I'm sure that probably occurred. Most of us, we have families who are family members, so they're checking out for one another. I'm sure the adult committee, the adult population had a little bit more difficult time, especially if they relied on Metrolift to get anywhere, because that got shut down pretty quickly. And then I don't think it came up for the whole week. So how does that help people? I don't know. It's not a good system at all. I doubt people would have been denied, going to a location, but the access and getting there would have been difficult. I know that some of the police officers were helping take people to those warming shelters, but if their police cars aren't wheelchair accessible, how does a person go? And, we got to think about those things. I mean, even during Harvey, I tried to get one of my employees who uses a power wheelchair from her home to a shelter. And the first responders told her to stay in her home because the bus that was at the other end where they were taking people wasn't accessible. So we really got to think about that whole system of how do we make sure that there's access for people who use wheelchairs and other devices that might need that help getting to a location.
I want us to switch gears for a moment and talk about the pandemic, COVID-19. We are still very much in a pandemic. And this week, Texas Governor Greg Abbott made what I think most people would consider a very alarming announcement. Dwayne, if we could please take a look at what Governor Abbott had to tell Texans this week.
It is now time to open Texas 100%. Everybody who wants to work should have that opportunity. Every business that wants to be open should be open. So today, I'm issuing a new executive order that rescinds most of the earlier executive orders. Effective next Wednesday, all businesses of any type are allowed to open 100%. that includes any type of entity in Texas. Also, I am ending the statewide mask mandate. Now, despite these changes, remember this: removing state mandates does not end personal responsibility or the importance of caring for your family members and caring for your friends and caring for others in your community. Personal vigilance to follow the safe standards is still needed to contain COVID. It's just that now state mandates are no longer needed.
So that was Texas Governor Greg Abbott there, that clip courtesy of CBS News. Mary Jane, as of just a couple of days ago, the positivity rate for COVID-19 in the state of Texas was still above 11%. 5% is what is suggested before reopenings en masse should commence. But the governor here is pushing the pedal to the metal. In terms of people who are disabled or immunocompromised, I would imagine that that announcement probably came as a horrifying, maybe not shock, but as a very shocking piece of news. What is your reaction to this announcement that not only will all businesses be reopened in the state of Texas, but the mask mandate has now been rescinded?
Well, I'm not very happy about it. Individuals with disabilities need protection just as much as you and I. And the whole purpose of a mask is not necessarily to protect ourselves, to protect others who might have immunocompromised systems or other disabilities that would make them more susceptible to possibly dying because of the COVID pandemic. And so it's not helpful that now people can just do what they want and not wear masks. And I found it interesting that Governor Abbott says, oh, you should personally take care of yourself and your family, but it's okay if you don't take care of everybody else by wearing masks. So I don't know. It's very disheartening, but I'm not surprised. The state of Texas is not very good for people with disabilities. Don't move here if you want any supports or services. The state of Texas is horrible about helping people with disabilities, that's for sure. So even for kids who have significant health needs, many haven't gone back to the in-person schooling just because of the whole issue of if you're in maybe a more restrictive setting with a whole bunch of other kids with disabilities and they can't wear masks, how can you ensure the safety of your child? So I know there's a lot of families out there that are probably even more concerned now. I see kids at the bus stop, typical kids, and yeah, they're required to wear masks, but I know next week that'll all come crashing down. School systems say that they're going to enforce it, but that's not going to happen.
My goodness, I am terrified for all vulnerable communities in Texas. And
oh, exactly. The elderly. I mean, yeah. And other thing is they're doing all this vaccination now, but they're doing it at a location that, I mean, if you don't have transportation there, how do you get there? You're supposed to be in your car. So our populations that have been most vulnerable to this, who have been most impacted, possibly can't even get vaccinated. So, that's a double whammy.
No, I appreciate you bringing up the vaccination, because that was really my next question for you, because, there were some tongue-in-cheek jokes floating around social media about Greg Abbott, like, oh, now that Greg Abbott got his second dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, now he says, oh, it's fine to reopen Texas. How has the vaccination rollout been going in Texas? Well, let's speak specifically and generally about your area, Mary Jane, in Houston. Are people who are disabled or immunocompromised but not elderly, are they able to be, are they in the priority group to get this vaccination?
They should be in the priority group. The hard part is figuring out how to register. Thankfully, working with the mayor's office for people with disabilities, we did connect with the Area Aging and Disability Resource Center here, and they are keeping a list. And so quite a few of our families who have older, adults with disabilities were able to get them on that list and have been able to get vaccinated. It was a slow process though. But I also look at, okay, I'm sure Metrolift isn't running through the vaccine line down at NRG. So what are those other adults with disabilities doing? Supposedly they have the ability to come out to your home, but I think, there's 10, most of those vials do 10 people. So you probably have to have 10 people around just to make sure. I am. Are you?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes. You just dropped out a couple times. Continue with your thought.
No, I was saying that supposedly, a vial of the vaccine can, take care of 10 people. But if you're one person living in your home, how does that work? So hopefully with the Johnson & Johnson thing, maybe the icing down of vaccine won't be as imperative. I don't know how it works, and maybe it'll be easier for individuals who are at home to get home delivery of a vaccine. So that would be nice.
That was so powerful what you said earlier, Mary Jane, about people who either are disabled or families with disabled members should not come to Texas because the resources are not there. The support services are not there. And then obviously presents an opportunity, or rather the need, for an organization such as yourself, Family to Family, a mutual aid group where people, regular people, pool their resources and their energy and their labor and do what they can to help those who are needy in their community. Talk to us about the kind of work that Family to Family does currently, and even the kind of work that you hope to be able to do. Can you tell us more about your organization?
So Family to Family really got started to help families navigate the complex medical system in Houston almost 30 years ago. And Dr. Brewer, who started it, was very altruistic and really believed that families needed that assistance. And then he met a group of young families who had kids with disabilities, and he realized, families helping other families is really the way to go. And he passed that nonprofit status on to the former executive director here. So we primarily started out helping families navigate the special education system in Texas or in Houston area. And as our children have aged, we've expanded and now help families also, figure out the resources through Medicaid. In Texas, you have to get they call it an interest list. It's really a waiting list for community supports like attendant care and respite, which is basically about 16 years long now. So helping families figure out that system, how to access supports and services in the community. We do a lot more case management and information referral, but over the last few years with the disasters, we've really been partnering with other organizations to get help out to families because they, as we talked about, the people with disabilities aren't really high on the list of helping being the people to be helped right away. We're also expanding into employment now. We really believe people with disabilities can work in the community. So we're just working with Texas Workforce to do some pre-employment training services for youth age 14 to 21. And that'll be rolling out in a couple months. So we do a lot of leadership and advocacy training and just training in general. Monday, I was on a training event with educators in our doctoral education system here. So and then we're out in the community working with some of our partners that serve our low-income communities, just helping those families understand the education system in general, let alone if you have a child with a disability. So we're really trying to take time to help educate families, because when you're educated about the education system and what services and supports your child can receive through that system, then you your child is able to graduate and possibly go on to post-secondary ed or employment. If you don't know how to, education is free. Adult services are not, and somebody's got to pay for it. And that's just the way it is here in Texas.
Well, let me ask, and before I let you go, because I'll tell you, Mary Jane, on this program, we do talk about things from what some would consider a radical perspective. And to me, I don't think it's radical that the government to which we pay taxes should be able to fully provide services for all members of the community, disabled or able-bodied. It should not matter. And it's a travesty and a tragedy that families have to hyper educate themselves about how to navigate this system to get the services that their children and their adult children need in order to survive. And it's almost like a labyrinth, right? Like it's not an easy system to navigate, and that's preposterous. So let me ask, if I could, are there lawmakers in Texas, either at the city level or the state level that you're aware of that is actually advocating for more resources, more funding, and more laws to put into place these supports that the disabled community absolutely deserves and needs in order to survive and thrive?
Well, it's been interesting. The Texas legislature only meets every other year. So they're meeting now. They just got back in session in January, but finally they're getting to bill hearings now. And there's been a lot of legislators that have been pushing for Medicaid expansion, which would be really nice for not just for people with disabilities, but also for, people. We have one of the highest uninsured rates in the United States. And then there's other ones that we do know that are really trying to help make the education system better and healthcare better for individuals with disabilities. We do have some.
Well, shout them out. Who are they? We want to know. We want to look them up. We want to say what's up. Who are they?
Representative Mary Gonzalez. She's over in El Paso. She's a big supporter. Stephanie Click is up in Dallas. Representative Click. My brain is not thinking now. You got me at the end of the day on Friday. There's a couple here in Houston as well. We were lucky enough for 2 years, we actually had a grant to have a public policy fellow. And so he made a lot of connections with our Houston contingent. Representative Alma Allen here in Houston is really good. Also in, trying to fight the fight for not just people with disabilities, but her community at large. So those are a few of them I can name off the top of my head right now.
And you named all women. Why does that not shock me? But go figure.
Exactly.
Well, listen, Mary Jane, I appreciate you making some time to tell us about what the ongoing situation still remains on the ground there in Texas. Now, 3 weeks after this tremendous winter storm that blew through the region, knocking out power, water, heat. We still do not know the final tally of the number of people that died during the storm, but we do know, per usual, disabled people and their needs and their survival was deprioritized. And that is a tragedy and a travesty. And we will continue to shine the light on that horrible injustice, but we certainly appreciate the work that you and your organization does there at Family to Family Network in Houston, Texas. Mary Jane Williams, we appreciate you making some time to speak with us today.
Well, thanks, Kim. I appreciate you, getting in touch with me and helping share the travesty for people with disabilities, probably not just here, but in probably a lot of other southern states. And, if people want to reach out and assist, but not for my organization necessarily, but Crowdsource Rescue is the one that's doing a lot of the help for individuals with food and water right now. And if they have a desire to help out, that's a great place to go.
All right, guys, you heard it. Thank you very much. We've been speaking to Mary Jane Williams, Executive Director for the Family to Family Network. Mary Jane, thank you again.
Thank you. Y'all have a great evening.
You too, honey. You too. All right, guys, that was great. I'm so glad that Mary Jane got back with us. We've been trying to speak with some mutual aid groups down in Texas, but everyone is incredibly busy, and I certainly understand that. So thank you again. Special thanks going out to Mary Jane. I'm sorry. I was in, the lovely Jean-Viette was dropping me what's them things called? Comments. And I wasn't reading them in the proper time. What's up, Microsoft? Word, technical support. Talking about Greg Abbott. He literally everybody needs to be careful. Yep, that is correct, guys. Greg Abbott and the governor of Mississippi, who have lifted these masks mandates, it is terrifying. I mean, I live in a state where Maryland's not doing the greatest, but we not at Texas levels. And when I heard that, I said, oh, Greg Abbott is out here trying to kill everybody. Well, and of course, Greg Abbott probably took his cues from the Grand Wizard, bigger than him, former President Donald Trump, who spoke at the conservative Political Action Conference this year, actually, the CPAC convention, which is where the craziest. I mean, listen, everyone who showed up at the January 6th Capitol insurrection had attended a CPAC at least once, right? And Trump spoke at CPAC to rousing enthusiasm. There's no split within the Republican Party. Don't let these major news outlets tell you that just because Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney don't get down with Donald Trump, that somehow that equals a split. Nay, negatory. There is no split. Trump is the winning ticket, despite the fact that he was the losing ticket in 2020. It wasn't as slim or as grand as a loss as some would believe. And if the Republicans at the state level, because there's a lot of new laws being introduced in state legislatures to make voting more restrictive, to put more barriers in place for people to vote, because, Trump believes that the election was stolen by those no good voting Blacks and Browns who had the audacity to show up and exercise their right to vote. So, something must be done about that. But all that notwithstanding, every time CPAC comes around, everybody, I'm reminded that the only time I ever made any kind of national news was at CPAC 2013. And let me set this up because I'm about to play a clip for y'all. And it's about 4 minutes. So everybody wants you to go get your popcorn and get real comfy real quick. All right. So let me set this up for you. What the clip we're about to watch is from CPAC 2013. But hold up, pump your brakes, because I attended CPAC 2012 also. It was held at the Wardman Hotel, the Wardman Marriott, up there off Connecticut Avenue, Woodley Park, Washington, D.C. And I went there with one of my white male co-workers, Carmen Russell. And I stepped in that joint and I was immediately uncomfortable because not only were there not a lot of Black people, but number one, it was packed. And number two, some of the looks I was getting from some of the CPAC attendees was not friendly. Let's just say that. Nobody said anything to me, but they was looking at me kind of crazy, right? All right. So CPAC 2012, the main thing that I remember from that was attending a breakout, a session. I'm going to paraphrase the name of the session. And actually, if one of y'all was so entrepreneuring on Google, you could probably find it. The name of the panel was titled, "How Multiculturalism is Destroying America." And the panel was sponsored by former Republican Congressman Steve King from Iowa. And it was the most racist shit I heard, but like all coded, like the intellectual racist stuff, right? They wasn't saying, the Negroes intellectually inferior. No, like it was explicit to the point where I got up and stormed out because I'm like, come on. y'all can't be serious now, are y'all? But they were dead ass serious. So being a glutton for punishment, I decided to attend CPAC 2013. And that one was held at National Harbor right here in Prince George's County, Maryland. And so the panel that things devolved where voices were raised and anger was directed towards me, the name of that panel was called How to Trump the Race Card. Are you tired of being called a racist when you know you're not one? And let me set this up for y'all. Now, this panel was being put on by two Black dudes, okay? Clayton Bigsby and his brother. This is a fully cited Clayton Bigsby, okay? Now, Clayton Bigsby's real name was K. Carl Smith. And let me tell y'all, K. Carl Smith and his brother had a nice little grift going on with these conservative white folks at the CPAC. They said, "Oh, we about to talk to y'all about race. Can we get a little stipend for talking to y'all about race?" I walked in the room, y'all. Two dudes were sitting there. I sat behind these two white guys. I wasn't paying these dudes no attention. Come to find out, these Bamas was famous white nationalists. I had no idea. But the one of them was wearing like a Confederate flag t-shirt, whatever. I'm like, all right, man, whatever. I'm about to sit in here and listen to this nonsense. So anyway, let's get into this clip here, Dwayne. So this is Clayton Bigsby. Keep in mind, Clayton Bigsby is trying to tell the white people, the conservatives, in a packed room that y'all are not really racist. And I'm going to tell y'all how to get around being called racist. And he's about to introduce a concept to y'all about being a Frederick Douglass Republican. Lord have mercy. Dwayne, please, brother, take it away.
I am a conservative, but that is not how I describe myself politically. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. The word conservative, the word Republican, the word Tea Party, the word U.S. Constitution, the words U.S. Constitution, those words have a negative connotation in this country. Why? We're losing the propaganda battle. If you call yourself a Black conservative, a Tea Party conservative, a Christian conservative, you might as well call yourself a Black racist, a Tea Party racist, a Christian racist. Why? We're losing the propaganda battle. Don't forget now, back in the 1950s and 60s, it was conservative Democrats who did all they could do to block civil rights legislation. They wanted to hold dear to the doctrine of their racist fathers.
My name is Scott Terry from North Carolina. I appreciate your method, but I have a few.
Sure.
I don't think you've addressed some of my considerations.
Okay.
So maybe you could.
What's that?
I'll lay them out. Maybe you can talk about it. It seems to me like you're reaching out to voters, your method, your program that you're offering us, at the expense of young white Southern males like myself, my demographic. I study literature, English literature and stuff, and as I read about the past, I really came to love my people and my culture.
Okay.
And that, I know that's anathema. I mean, I know that's
no, it isn't.
bad to say.
So nobody said that.
Yeah.
So
my question would be, I mean, I feel like my people, my demographic, are being systematically disenfranchised.
Okay.
And furthermore, you know, people like the lady over here in the red shirt applauded and said, "Yay, that's good." My problem is, why can't we be more like Booker T. Washington Republicans and his famous statement that let's be unified like a hand, but separate like the fingers?
Okay. The question is, why can't we be more unified like Booker T. Washington Republicans versus Frederick Douglass? They call Booker T. Washington second to Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was the originator. Okay? So when you study Douglass, Douglass was not.
How about the unity and diversity?
What about it? Douglass talked about that.
Why can't we
Here's an example. Here's an example. When Douglass escaped from slavery, I think 10 years or 20 years after he escaped from slavery, he writes a letter to his former slave master and said, "I forgive you for all the things you did to me."
Forgiving him shelter, food, all those.
No. Listen, wait a minute now.
I'm serious.
Wait now. You just said. Wait. No. Wait, sir. Let me be honest. Let me address your first question. Yes, let me address the first question. We're gonna move on.
I'll let people throw stuff.
Well, you said something.
I love my people. What's wrong?
Sir?
that's all right. That's all right. I'm one of your people.
Let me address this. Let me see.
Slavery is not a benefit to black people.
Okay, listen up.
Listen up.
Let's go on.
discussion about also what happened at Wayne Factory.
Let me address this, please. Hey, please, let me address this. Hey, Carl, if I can, just
we can talk about it.
Folks, I love the passion.
Let me tell you guys something. These gentlemen are being extremely disingenuous with
Wait,
you.
time out.
I'm
Wait, time out, man. Time out. You said you have a question. That's the statement. That's right. That does not demean or belittle. That's right. It simply highlights some harm.
Sir, let me be clear.
Let someone else speak.
Hold on, excuse me.
Let someone else speak.
Let
someone else speak.
Ma'am,
you're disrupting me.
Sir, I'd like to
someone
ask a
else speak.
question.
You've asked questions.
No, I haven't. May I please ask
You're
a question?
disrupting this. Let someone else
May
speak.
I ask a question? I'd like to ask a question.
Let someone else ask.
We got a question right here.
You guys didn't allow me to
We'll talk
ask my
outside.
question.
We got a question right here.
I mean, you guys don't want to hear. My question is, why don't we hear repudiation from the right when there are racist statements being made?
It worked both ways. It worked both ways. Back in 2004.
But I'm asking you about the Republicans, sir. Okay, go ahead.
I agree with you saying that. It's about principles. If they did it, they're wrong.
Clayton Bigsby and his brother was running big game on them conservatives. And listen, the reason why I even stood up and said anything, I said, oh my gosh, these dudes are telling these white folks to go approach black people and tell them that they're Frederick Douglass Republicans. These white people gonna get punched in the face. And not to say that they shouldn't get punched in the face, but he was setting them up for failure. And I was appalled. But it was a very interesting moment there. And to me, it was that sort of moment that began to build for what that we saw with this continuing escalation of racist rhetoric flagrantly from the Republican Party and eventually by the president, Donald Trump. And let's fast forward, if we could, y'all, to 2016, where by now, all the racism's on the table, okay? Donald Trump is running for president. And at a very infamous rally in Louisville, Kentucky, hold on, let me get to this here rally. Dwayne, I want us to pull up, if we could, C1, you guys. This is a quick clip of what you guys probably remember happened to this Black woman when she and other protesters showed up to demonstrate against the racist rhetoric of Donald Trump. Dwayne, if we could roll C1, please, sir.
This is the newest video. It shows a perspective of the 21-year-old University of Louisville student as she's being pushed out of the venue by a 75-year-old Korean War veteran.
So jump ahead. The heads of Christians and anybody
Get out of here.
And we're worried about waterboarding. We are absolutely, we are going downhill fast.
This 21-year-old University of Louisville student says she was called every name in the book, including racial slurs, as she was shoved out of Donald Trump's rally Tuesday.
Get out!
The woman is pushed by several people. The man you see here is a 75-year-old Korean War veteran from Cincinnati. He tells me he was pushed first. He says he's not racist, and he says the entire Trump event got out of hand.
Well, guys, it turns out that a member of the Burn It Down with Kim Brown family was front and center at that exact same event. And of course, we know this person was on the right side of Jesus. They was on the right side of anti-racism. Dwayne, if we could please pull up B2. And y'all pay homage to the sister who stood up with all them racists, all the sisters, Black sister who was getting pushed around, and this sister right here. Dwayne, B2, please.
What happened to you at the Trump rally?
I was at the Trump rally in order to protest Trump and his racist and xenophobic behaviors and policies. And as soon as we began to protest, when we held up the banners, we had barely even gotten them up when a group of neo-Nazis who I'd been observing all day, recruiting, other Trump followers, like walking around, literally giving out like some kind of card or something to them and talking to them all day. I had taken pictures of their shirts. They rushed over towards us and started punching and kicking. I was luckily towards the back and didn't get the brunt of it, but I was shoved by their leader, Mr. Black, I think, and I was shoved by him when I was walking out, and then as I left, I was basically shoved by every person I passed.
Have you identified Mr. Matthew Heimbeck as the individual who was, I guess, pushing and shoving and doing most of the punching?
I don't know if he was doing most of the punching, but he definitely rushed in, and I'm sure he was the one that pushed me because he was right in the spot, the only person that could have done it. He definitely did it. He rushed in with, I think, about 4 or 5 other members of his group. One was a woman, but yeah, he definitely pushed me.
Final question. Have you ever been to, I guess, a political rally? Let me ask this. How do you respond to, Trump supporters who say, I'm not a racist, I don't think that Mr. Trump is racist, and that simply this is a response from his political opponents pointing out 1 or 2, or maybe even 5 individuals who have these extreme views in the crowd? He can't control that.
I watched that guy operate for 3 hours. I was there about 3 hours, and I watched him the entire time, and I watched him walk up to people. I never saw anyone walk away disgusted. I never saw anyone give him any flack. I never saw a Trump official come over and say anything like, hey, we don't want white supremacists here. And then I watched him encourage the other members of the people there to attack peaceful protesters. And we were by not even close to the only people that were attacked that day. And Mr. Trump was on the stage saying things like, get them out of here. Get out of here. Yeah, let's go get them. And I think he said something that day, something like, if I say don't hurt them, then the media says I will be too weak. And and specifically people of color were the ones that I was lucky because I could hide in my skin. And so most of the day, no one bothered me until basically I started protesting. But any person of color was being taunted and harassed by the crowd the entire time.
That video was courtesy of the Courier-Journal in Louisville. And Dwayne, if you could pop up B1 for me, because that was Molly Shaw, you guys. Molly Shaw does our social media here. And Molly Shaw, along with 2 of the other protesters from that day in Louisville, actually sued Donald Trump. And we could ask Molly how that lawsuit worked out. I don't think it worked out in the favor, but the fact that y'all decided to go ahead and sue Donald Trump for the behavior of his attendees at that rally, for the assaults that his supporters committed against peaceful protesters, was quite remarkable. And we're joined today from Germany with Molly Shaw, who does social media here. She's a patron. And maybe she'll marry me and give me some citizenship so I can get the fuck out of America. You've done so much for our country so far, Molly. Molly's face, that was hilarious. Thank you, Molly, for making some time. Thank you. And I didn't even know that you were there during one of the catalytic moments to signify where this Trump campaign was headed, firmly in the direction of fervent racism and budding violence. Talk to me about what your recollections are of that day and your encounters with Matthew Heimbeck, who was one of the assholes who was in that CPAC panel that I was in, even though he didn't yell at me, but he put his hands on you, which makes our situations completely different. But I mean, Molly, how do you remember that rally?
Watching that video, I was like, wow, I didn't know his name when I said his name wrong. And I can't believe there was a time in my life where I didn't know his name, but because it became such a huge thing. So the thing, the violence of the rally was really scary. Basically, we were rushed by all sides. There were about 5 or 6 neo-Nazis who rushed a group of 5 of us, I think, and we were attacked from sort of all sides. And people were punched and hit. I was shoved really hard from behind by Heimbach. And then when I was leaving, I was basically shoved by every other single person that I passed, like just hit me or pushed me or shoved me. It was terrifying. And I remember like looking for like the police or Secret Service or, like something. And then I realized, oh, they're not going to help us. Like, like that's not who they protect, which is, a lesson that people that don't have my skin color learn a lot earlier in life. But that was a big revelation, was like, oh, no one is going to rush in. And luckily I was able to get to the back of the convention center and leave relatively safely, although it never felt, until I actually was like out of downtown Louisville, it never felt safe because there were fights going on outside the convention center. There was all kinds of violence happening. The famous video from there is the video of Shia, who was my co-plaintiff, and she's super brave and had it way worse than I did. And she basically, her attack happened right after we were moved out because we sort of created this hole and she was there by herself, which I can't even imagine because I had 5 people with me. So I had people who knew where I was and, like we had a safety plan and she was just there by herself. But I feel like I talk a lot about the, like what happened, but like actually like what I find way scarier is what happened before. Which is that essentially like for 3 hours, because Trump was late, it was the day Chris Christie endorsed him, I remember. So Chris Christie was late, his plane was late, so we were there for 3 hours waiting for Trump to go on. And I was next to Matthew Heimbach and the Traditional Workers Party, which was the group he's with now. And I watched them recruit person after person, and they used like not particularly coded language, saying things like, people are taking your jobs, like nobody stands up for white people, just sort of like all day long happening, this like long recruitment, and no one stopped them and no one said, go away. It was just like, yeah, like that's what happens, it's because they're primed with this rhetoric, all day long, like violent racist rhetoric. And then like when it came down to like being violent, they were like, so I think like it really taught me like how quickly sort of fascism can work, like how fast things can change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, Molly, because at that point of the election cycle, I mean, Trump was not the nominee. Like it was still a fairly crowded field of GOP contenders trying to become the party's nominee for president. And it wasn't wrapped up for Trump. But, how did that event in Louisville sort of become like a harbinger for the momentum that the Trump campaign would pick up amongst these white nationalists, amongst these people who were racist, because I can't even use that bullshit that economically oppressed or, economically anxious. It's bullshit. Like these people were racist. They held the same sort of views about immigrants, about Black people, about, LGBTQ people, et cetera. But you sort of had a prescient take of how that day's events was going to evolve into what we saw become of the Trump campaign and then eventually the Trump presidency.
Yeah, and I think that sort of goes to like the lawsuit that we ended up filing against him also. So the reason that I really didn't particularly want to file a lawsuit, because it seemed like a lot of stress and a lot of bringing Nazis into my life, which it did. Like my number got posted on Stormfront. It was a huge mess for like several months. So I didn't want to do that, but I felt like it was important because I was like, if somebody, files, at the time I was a special education teacher, and I was like, if somebody files this lawsuit, then it will look like, oh, this is horrible. Like what happened was horrible. And how are we going to let this person be president? And like, that was like, it was like, okay, I'm willing to do this because I think it will make an important statement. But and it got press. It got national press. It got lots of attention. And it did nothing because Trump was not going to apologize. Nothing was going to be said by the campaign to say that they disavow any of it. And it sort of was like this thing that happened throughout the Trump administration, which was this sort of passive, like we either wink, wink, nod, nod white supremacists, or we outright encourage them, like the fine people or whatever in Charlottesville. To me, it's a real precursor to a lot of the stuff that happened in Charlottesville. It's a lot of the same people. Heimbach was involved in Charlottesville and in the Pikeville rally that happened before Charlottesville that also was a big white nationalist gathering. And it was just sort of clear that this ball started rolling. And our lawsuit, what actually happened to it was it went to the Court of Appeals in the Sixth Circuit, and they ruled that Trump was not liable because it was political speech, even though he was literally yelling from the stage things like, get him out of here and all this stuff. But it was political speech and not, and so it was covered under the First Amendment and we couldn't sue him, which I think is total bullshit. And the ACLU also backed them up and they are total bullshit. And and that I'm pissed about that to this day because I think it was a very poor ruling. But when you look at what happened at the Capitol, people are like, oh, they're going to go after Trump and people are going to sue him and these people are going to sue him. And I'm like, there's a precedent case out of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals that says that is political speech. And what he said at that rally was way less inflammatory as towards directing people than what he said before the Capitol riot. So I actually find it really difficult to believe that any court is going to find him liable for any of the racist rhetoric that led to the Capitol riots.
Molly, I was reading because I'm very appreciative that you wanted to even talk about this because I can imagine how difficult and honestly traumatic that must have been for you, not only on that day, but what you just mentioned about being doxxed by Nazis. I'm sure that was not fucking pleasant.
Yeah,
right?
My kid was 4 at the time and they put her name on Stormfront and I was like, this is bad.
No. Well, in reading some of the articles about the lawsuit that you and your co-plaintiffs filed, there was a quote from you that said, and I'm paraphrasing you here, but you said, you can't raise your child in a country like this that allows the president to go on like this and target people like this. And I was so very proud of you because you followed through. I'm proud of anyone who can escape America. Okay. like you escaped America and that's amazing. And I'm so happy for you. But what is your perspective now, having endured, in the moment that violence and then having to deal with the bullshit that came after that, in addition to filing the lawsuit and then having the suit dismissed. But now you have some time and some perspective between that incident and America. Are you glad you got the fuck out of Dodge? And do you see America improving without Donald Trump in the White House, or are we from where you sit? Is America still in a very fucked up place?
America's still in a very fucked up place. I am happy. I guess I have a lot of privilege because my husband has a tech job and it was relatively easy to leave the country for us. I feel a little bit of guilt because I feel like that maybe there was fighting to be done that I'm not doing. But yeah, looking at it now, I can sort of see there's this people just do not want to recognize this hate. They do not want to recognize this problem. They want to pretend it's isolated. They want to there's a lot of talk about how this is rednecks, this is white trash people. These are rich people that I watch do this. These are people at the Trump rally that I watched personally do it. These are people who had time in the middle of their day on a Wednesday to go down and stand for 4 hours in a convention center. A lot of them were dressed I was sitting next to these 2 old ladies that were discussing a Macy's sale. These are upper class white people, and a lot of the people at the Capitol, they were flying private jets. They're not you know, like they're to pigeon them in this like hole and say that this is what this is and it's just poor white trash and that's who's the problem, I think is like really ignoring the depth of the problem and like, you know, the depth of the problem for 400 years, right? But also I think like there just hasn't been a reconciliation of like how the Democrats, like our mayor, literally like the mayor of Louisville, who is a Democrat, or I don't know, actually he's a Democrat, that's exactly what he is, but he's horrible. And he like released this statement like after this violence, which was like completely peaceful protesters. None of the protesters were on any video like attacking back or whatever, being violently attacked by Nazis. And he basically was like, there was violence from both sides, just the same shit that Trump did. It wasn't any difference. And that's the same stuff that like, you know, Joe Biden kicks off his campaign with like a Charlottesville video, doesn't meet with any of the people in Charlottesville, of course, but like kicks off his campaign, but then basically kind of parrots the same, like, this is a both sides problem. Antifa is a problem too. And it's just not that. Like Antifa is who kept me safe. Like when this happened, like literally like watching social media and like sending me threats and letting me know like what was happening. Like that's who kept me safe. Like my community did, not the police certainly, and not, you know, any Democrats. And I think like Joe Biden is just sort of like the representation of that kind of Democrat who like is putting their head in the sand and doesn't want to actually deal with the problem and is also going to ignore, you know, like the systemic issues and capitalism that cause all of it to begin with. So I don't see it going anywhere good without like a real reckoning of the left.
A reckoning of the left 100%, right. And understanding that, you know, they kind of looked at Trump as sort of like a temporary threat, like, oh, whew, Trump's out of the White House. Everybody could take a deep breath.
Russia. Like
all right. Crisis averted. Let's deal with Iran. Let's, you know, deal with all this other shit. And it's like, no, like you guys are ignoring facts here. Like, you know, January 6th can happen again, maybe not at the Capitol because there's so much, you know, fortification militarily of, you know, the U.S. Capitol campus. But as we saw, Molly, at state capitals across the country last summer, you know, it can go down, right? Do you believe, from what you witnessed and what you have just seen what's happened in this country over the past 5 years, you think Trump's going to run again in 2024? Do you think that the MAGA brand remains strong enough that he could still pose a formidable threat to, I guess, incumbent Joe Biden or even perhaps an incumbent Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Trump he's very old. But, you know, like you said, I said that to you the other day, and you're like, evil lives forever. That's true. So I don't know. I think like Trump like is an incompetent fascist in my opinion. Like he was successful at many things and ruined many people's lives. I don't want to discount that, but I feel like he's a narcissist. So it's more about him. Like fascism is a means to an end with Trump, as opposed to like what he really believes in. He doesn't really believe in anything except himself. What I fear is like somebody like behind Trump that's like more savvy, smarter, and is an actual like believing fascist, and the Republican Party is full of them. So, I mean, maybe Trump will run again, and like that would be bad and scary and not good. And he might win because they can't even give us $2,000 that they said they were going to promise. And, you know, Kristen's name is out on the like floor doing a cute little thumbs down to the minimum wage increase. So I can't see how the Democrats are going to win in 2 years or in 4 years. But I'm more afraid of like somebody maybe sort of like more smarter and more organized and more willing to kind of play the game, but still a fascist that might come after Trump.
I mean, I think Vegas needs to be taking odds on who is that going to be. And of course, you guys know I've said it before. I mean, Ivanka, you know, would be at these state dinners with these foreign ministers, and they're like, "What the fuck is Ivanka doing here?" You know what I mean? Like, what do you bring to the table here, Ivanka? But Ivanka, Ted Cruz, and probably some wild card that perhaps I'm lacking the imagination to.
Yeah, maybe Josh Hawley. He seems to be evil enough, and like, I mean, they've got these like just like dyed in the wool QAnon people too, and it's like, who knows? But
who knows? But we know that the Democrats don't have anything good for them, right? Like the Democrats, we don't know. Like they want to very much hamstrung their more progressive members and stick to this sort of centrist bullshit. And that's not going to work for voters in 2022 and 2024, because you know what? If the Democrats are determined to not improve themselves, like, and still like expect us to show up for them, they're going to be mistaken. And unfortunately, I guess the Republicans are just going to be in power because fuck you, I'm not showing up for y'all no fucking more. Run me my check.
Yeah, I mean, I vote in Kentucky, so it doesn't matter, but I didn't vote for Joe Biden because it's like, what is Joe Biden going to do? Like, it's just capitulating to this idea that everything is fine and we just need to get back to like polite imperialism and polite capitalism, and you know, capitalism of all colors and queer people. It's just like, what's the point? Like, I mean, like all that does is lead to fascism eventually, because fascism is the logical outcome of capitalism. And so, yeah, I don't see like the Democrats taking on they love capitalism, so why would they ever take it on? And so I don't see this ever not being a problem in the Democrats. If the Democrats are the opposition.
Well, we know they're not the real opposition, really. And this latest police reform bill that I'm about to get into is pretty proof positive of that, right? Like, even though this bill got 0 Republican votes, if you look at it, if you like read it, I'm like, oh, the Republicans totally could have signed off on this. They just didn't out of ideological spite. But I'm gonna save that. Well, I'm gonna get into that, but I'm gonna let you go, Molly. And I thank you for even agreeing to talk about this with me, because again, like, that was looking at that scene, and I remember when it happened. Obviously, I didn't know you at the time. I didn't know you were connected to it, but I'm like, oh my God, that looked scary as shit. Like that little dumb shit that I was in at CPAC, that shit wasn't scary. The motherfuckers was just raising their voice. Like I wasn't afraid of anyone in that room. But if I'd have been that sister who was with you, in Louisville that day, I probably would have been a little fearful. Although, to her credit, she had a smile on her face the whole time, and she didn't look like she was afraid.
Awesome. So Shia is amazing. Like, she's an amazing person.
Very evident. But I appreciate what you did, Molly, and I appreciate what you do here.
Yes. Join the Patreon.
Yes, you guys. Molly Shaw. She handles social media for us. You see that she is a anti-racist freedom fighter, very much in her own right, which is why she fits in perfectly here at the Burn It Down with Kim Brown family. Molly Shaw joining us today from Germany. We appreciate you, Molly. Thank you. All right, guys. Now, Dwayne is running this, and I know it's 6:15. Dwayne, don't beat me. I'm gonna be up out of here in about 5 minutes. But I had to hit this one thing, y'all, because okay. Dwayne said we could chill. Well, my weed's all the way on the other side of the room. I can't go grab and roll up. We not be able to chill. But we're gonna hit this one last topic here, gang, and y'all already know what I am talking about. Let's, Dwayne, my brother, if you could hit me with E1 at your convenience, please, and thank you. So, the George Floyd Accountability and Policing Act. You guys know this. On just a couple of days ago, the House voted to advance this bill. They passed it 220 to 212, advancing this bill towards the Senate. Now, as you see, only 2 Democrats voted against this. I need to, God damn it. Genevieve, do me a favor. Can you find out which 2 Democrats voted against this in the House? As you see, it only got 1 Republican yay, 210 Republican nays, and that's not surprising at all. We know that the Republicans are not really interested in police reformation. And truly, when we look at this bill, we know that the Democrats are not truly interested in reformation of police anyway, because what do we know, class? The police cannot be reformed. You have to abolish them because this is a system that is devoid of reformation, okay? It's not possible. The policing system as it is right now is doing exactly what it was supposed to do. Dwayne, can you pull up E2 for me, please? Because we follow the good people on Twitter at the Hood Communist blog, and I'm a very big fan of their analysis of a variety of issues. And I know they have a bunch of different people manning the accounts. But I thought this was a valid point that needed to be hammered home again. The George Floyd Act that passed the House last night gives American police $750 million in additional funding to investigating themselves for deadly use of force. It is a bunch of bullshit. And they also quote tweet themselves, the Hood Communist blog, and say, search the bill of the text of the bill of the George Floyd Act for $750 million and then search grants. This bill gives police millions and millions of dollars. Now, why is that bad? It's bad because the police are the most overfunded type of agency next to the military. I guess just under the military, the American policing system receives the lion's share of most municipal budgets, way more than public health. We're in a pandemic, way more than public education. Our public education is some shit. System that is in the sense that a lot of the public education infrastructure is crumbling in many, many places across this country. And quite frankly, if people are still teaching the kids about the explorers and the conquistadores, like I remember in elementary school, like we had to name like as many European explorers as we could. And to me, don't be teaching the kids that bullshit in 2021. We need to reform public education, but that's another subject. So public health, public infrastructure, public education, all receive crumbs compared to policing. And that's the problem, I think, with this bill. If the bill continues to give police money, then it's sort of missing the point. I'm sure you guys saw this as well as the congressional hearings are continuing about what happened into the January 6th insurrection. The U.S. Capitol Police Service, who some of its members opened the fucking gates for the insurrectionists, they have the audacity to ask for a 20% budget increase. Mind you, the motherfuckers just got a $50 million budget increase in this year's budget. So they asking for $100 million more for next year. And mind you, they fucked up. Like, how often or why are we going to continue to fund failure? But the problem is, the police, I guess, don't fail. The police, I guess, are doing exactly what they are meant to be doing. And the other elements of this bill that I wasn't so crazy about has to do with the ban on chokeholds. Okay, chokeholds are already banned in a lot of police jurisdictions across the country. Doesn't mean that the police still don't choke the shit out of people. It's banned on paper, but okay, y'all want to ban it on federal paper. Okay, I don't know if that's going to actually save any lives. The issue about mandatory reporting for police violence, there's some sort of mandatory reporting now for police departments. They're supposed to report their stats to the Department of Justice. Now, I believe right now that this is an opt-in sort of system, which is why we have such incomplete data at the federal level about how much police brutality out there exists, like how many people actually die from police violence. These are all statistics that have, up until recently, the past since let's say 2013, 2014 or so, like places like The Guardian, places like Al Jazeera, like they were doing like independent reconciliation of this data. It wasn't necessarily collected, at least thoroughly, at the federal level. So it's like, okay, like these sound like very toothless reforms, right? We already have a Department of Justice that can put police departments under consent decree. Well, what exactly does that mean / does that do? The best example that I can think of and look directly to is the consent decree in Baltimore City, right? The police haven't shaped up shit in Baltimore. And they had a whole squad, the Gun Trace Task Force, y'all. Look it up, GTTF in Baltimore City. They had a bunch of cops go down, get charged federally. But in terms of how the police still do their day-to-day dealings with people in the community, they're still fucking people up. They still out there violating people's civil rights. They still locking people up for bullshit. They still locking people up for weed. You know what I mean? Like, we have to let go of this idea that police somehow could be reformed. And I don't necessarily think that it's going to happen at the federal level. Genevieve, what did she say? Genevieve said 2 Democrats, Representatives Jared Golden from Maine and Ron Kind from Wisconsin, voted against the measure. And they sound like 2 white dudes. Do I have that right? Jared might be black. Ron, I don't know about Ron. I don't know about right. Genevieve said they both white. So what's going on? What was Jamal and Corey and them talking about? And I know what they was talking about. I saw Cory Bush's speech on the floor of the House. And y'all I'm very frustrated because I feel like there are more people in Congress now who probably get it than maybe have ever gotten it. But because Democrats are so beholden to law enforcement, like they're still purposely going to get this wrong. Like they know that they can't truly promote any sort of federal accountability for local law enforcement without capitulating to the cops in some way. So like y'all still giving them money, nigga. Like why? Why? Dwayne, there is a clip of Nancy Pelosi. Lord have mercy. I'm so sick of Nancy Pelosi. I swear to good gracious. That is F1, Dwayne. Can we hear from the House Speaker about the passing of this momentous legislation?
Last night on the floor of the House, members quoting him, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," or calling for his mother. Now, this bill will not bring him back, or Breonna Taylor, say her name, Breonna Taylor, bring them back. But hopefully it will prevent. And I say that as one raised in a political family where we were taught as we grew up to honor the men. It was that long time ago, the men in blue.
Girl. You from Baltimore, Nancy Pelosi. Baltimore police been fucking niggas up for quite some time. Maybe not reference the fact you come from a political family that talks about honoring the blue. Yeah. So how can you honor the blue at the same time you're saying, say her name, Breonna Taylor? You see, this is why you shouldn't teach these phony liberals none of our language, right? Because they co-opt that shit in a hot second. And make it sound like, oh, just because I'm saying the phrase. Aren't I saying the phrase right, everybody? But my kente cloth, isn't it straight? Okay, like, oh, what? I'm saying it correct. Yeah, but you're not doing none of the policies correctly. So huge mistake by the House to pass this bill that allows all this money in grants to go towards police and police reform when they should be going to create mental health crisis response teams, because how many people have we seen, let's just say over the past 12 months, get shot and killed by police or be met with a violent response because they were having a mental health crisis? The police should not be responding to these kinds of incidents. There has to be like a whole separate number. So how about $750 million to set up like the 511 number, right? Like that's who you call. If your family member is in the house lunching, please don't call the police. I've said this before, y'all, seriously, stop. If you're black and brown, even if you're white and you have black and brown friends, please don't ever, under no circumstances, call the cops. Like, do not call the cops. Like, you got to figure out a way to deal with the motherfucker. Unless you want them to be hurt or killed, then sure, call the cops. Yeah, I'll call the cops on this one. But if you care about them, no. Please refrain from calling law enforcement on your family members, because chances are, if they are seriously lunching, it's not going to end well. So there's that. But I did want to touch on that. And we'll see where this goes in the Senate. I don't think it's going very far in the Senate. I would be shocked, actually. I would actually be kind of pissed off if Senate Democrats went out on a limb for this George Floyd. And I'm so almost regretful that this bill is named after him, because I don't really think it does his memory justice. I mean, George Floyd was not choked to death, right? Like, so how would the ban on chokeholds impact his situation? It would not have at all. So they're not addressing the roots of the policing issue. And I don't like that this bill is named after him. But if Democrats decide to put their political capital pedal to the metal, so to speak, to pass this more so than the $15 an hour minimum wage, grand opening, grand closing for that Biden-Harris administration. They're going to be some one-take-term tackies. Only one term for you Negroes and half Negroes, because no, this is preposterous. But guys, we're gonna wrap this up. We've been going at this almost an hour and a half, and I'd like to thank everybody that worked on this program. Thank you very much to Dwayne Gladden for filling in, doing the production thing while Tunde is off today. Thank you so much to Jean-Pierre Montanar, my trusted producer and show booker. Yes, and thank you so much to Molly Shaw for being a guest today, for sharing her experience dealing with the racists at that Trump rally, and for holding down our social media and our Patreon and all those amazing things. And special thanks to our first guest, Mary Jane. Now, do y'all think Mary Jane would have been cool if I'd have sparked up some Mary Jane? I mean, it would have only been right? Dumb. I never know. I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, right? So I didn't know. I didn't know which way Mary Jane was leaning. So I just decided to err on the side of cautions. But Mary Jane Williams, the executive director for the Family to Family Network based out of Houston, Texas, advocating for disabled children and empowering their families. I appreciate all of y'all's contribution. And just a quick thing, real quick. The reason we did not have a show Tuesday is because my dog, Bagheera, was not doing well. Bagheera is 12. She's a pit bull. She's been through a lot. This dog is extremely tough. And whereas Tuesday, I was afraid we were about to say goodbye to Bagheera, she got some treatment at the vet. She got hooked up. Shout out to Dogs and Cats out there in Bowie, Maryland. And shout out to the Hyattsville Animal Hospital, Dr. K and Dr. Dubois. They really help my dog, and she's better. She's not out of the woods yet, so hopefully Bagheera will get better. But thoughts and prayers up to Bagheera, please. These are my dog daughters. I love them immensely, and I know dogs don't live forever. And I know 12 is old for a dog, but she's still my dog, and she's gonna be here as long as the good Lord says she will. I'm just trying to see. She's asleep. I was going to take the computer over there so you guys could check out Bagheera, but maybe we'll do that on the AMA. I wanted to do an AMA tonight after tonight's show, but I didn't clear that with Dwayne. So maybe we'll do an AMA next Friday night. Weigh in on Patreon, guys. Let me know if that works for everybody. I feel bad that we were only down a show this week, so I want to do something a little bonusy for next week. So let me know what y'all think if we could do the Ask Me Anything next Friday night after the Friday show. So that's it. That's the program. Thank you all so much for watching and for supporting. Thank you so much to everyone that works on this program. I already said that. Thank you to our guests. And we will see y'all next week. Don't forget, even though Greg Abbott and whoever that bitch ass nigga governor of Mississippi is, just because they said that the mask mandate is done, COVID ain't done. There's a bunch of strains. They got the UK remix. They got the South African remix. They got the Brazilian remix. Let's see. They got a bunch of remixes out here, y'all. Do not be out here fucking around. COVID is still jumping on people. Very much so. I do not want it to jump on you. Please wear your mask. Wash your hands. Social distance. Get your vaccination. And y'all niggas gonna get mad if I say get vaccinated? Because guess what, niggas? I'm trying to get on an airplane at some point, and I'm trying to go to a concert. So I will be getting vaccinated, bitch, because I'm trying to get the fuck out the goddamn house. So you niggas can do whatever y'all want to do. I suggest a vaccination. You got the vax hookup? Oh, look at you. All right, Dwayne over here taking people's vaccinations, man. You out here taking people's vaccinations, Dwayne. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Anyway, y'all have a great weekend. Have a great weekend. I will see y'all Tuesday, I promise. All right? See y'all later. Bye-bye. Why you out here stealing vaccinations, Dwayne?